the when you put in the shrimp, I count about at least 5 shrimp. That's what we cook everything in. Before you cook it.
It's just scrambled. Grandma's gonna give you and
But there's so much stuff in it that it makes it kind of fulfilling.
How long does it, once you start the flame, how long does it typically take?
Usually it takes me 45 minutes to an hour.
That will vary.
Well, the once you put the rice in to boil all the water off and get the rice tender, takes probably about 20 minutes. So the rest of the time is how long I take to brown the meat and do all the other stuff before I add the rice.
So you create the sofrito flavors.
Yeah.
You cook the meat in it, and then after the meat's cooked, you add the rice, and then the rice tenderizes, and then it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, but then you add the shrimp and you add the
Extra flavors.
Yeah. It's like when I grill things, I found that I have to sit there. That this idea that you put things on the grill and you walk away, it never works because you gotta watch it probably every minute.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the paella. It's just the rice takes 20 minutes or so to boil down. But in the meantime, I'm gonna flip it and I'm gonna add other things and it's just a matter of I go through the list, put everything in, mix it together, and there's no big secret to it.
So what brings out like all the flavors? Does the rice cook in the juices of the other?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just like in a jambalaya, that the jambalaya is as a rule, is a much simpler recipe because you only add, like sausage or something like that. But you do actually in the jambalaya do the same thing as you. All Puerto Rican cooking, for example, starts with what they call the sofrito. And sofrito, basically you stir fry onions and peppers and garlic and tomatoes and whatever you're gonna use, and that's what basically gives the flavor to everything else.
Okay.
So when I put in initially, with the olive oil, I put in the pork and the chicken to brown, and at the same time I add the garlic and and the tomatoes and the onions and the peppers and all that kind of stuff. And once that's kind of browning and so forth, then I add the rice with the water. And what I've been doing is I add a quart of chicken broth right for one of the 4 quarts of water. For 4 pounds of rice, you probably need about 4 quarts of water.
So you substitute chicken broth for one
for
of them?
1 quart.
Okay.
And that just before, again, things have evolved. When I first started doing this, I used to take a whole chicken and boil it, then pick all the meat out of it and put it in, and then take the chicken broth and pour it in.
Yeah.
Well, I learned that I can buy the chicken broth.
Yeah.
I can buy chicken thighs and cut them up, and it's a lot easier than picking it off the carcass of a whole chicken.
That's a long process.
And so a lot of things gotten a little simpler as I've gone along, and found out I didn't have to chop up tomatoes because you buy diced tomatoes.
Yeah.
And and the same thing with the minced clams. I can, they add a flavor. I actually add, when I put in the minced clams, I pour in the juice that comes in the can with it. So all of that adds
flavor
to the flavor, and that's why it may taste a little different one time or another, because obviously the mixture of ingredients varies a little bit.
Yeah, and the timing.
Yeah, and like today, and that's one of the things that changes. Like, often I cannot find raw shrimp that's been peeled. So then I buy the peeled cooked one, and the problem with that is that then you have to put them in real late because they're already cooked.
Warm them up.
And then if they're too cold, then it kind of gets all messed up. So today she's gonna thaw out the frozen shrimp because she found it peeled, and we'll put those in. But then I have to figure out, you want to put them in long enough so they'll cook, while the water is boiling off.
Yeah.
But you don't want to put them in too early.
Yep.
Because then they might get overdone. So but again, there's no magic formula to it. And if you read the recipes for paella, they tell you that then you put the rice in and the water, and you just let it steam for 20 minutes and don't touch it. I found that stirring it every so often evens it out a little bit more and evens out the flavors. But that's just the way I do it. I take the big spoon and stir it up.
Yeah.
It keeps it from sticking to the bottom as much too.
Right. So when did you first start making paellas?
60 years ago, I guess. I grew up in Puerto Rico, and we used to eat paella. But I left Puerto Rico, relatively early. I mean, I left right after medical school. So I didn't do any kind of cooking or anything like that back then.
As a kid, teen.
Yeah. When we were in the military, my friend Gus was in the military at the same time in Germany. So we went to visit him one time in February, and there was snow on the ground. It was freezing cold, but we decided to make a paella, and he had gotten a dish. So that's probably the first time I made one with him. We were out on the balcony of his apartment with about 6 inches of snow and on a charcoal grill, and the Germans all looking at us, these crazy Americans.
Yeah.
What are they up to?
That's funny. So your first paella was in Germany.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then when we moved to Detroit, that's when I bought a paella dish. And I had a lot of I guess, Spanish-speaking interns and residents. One was from Spain, another one was from Colombia, and anyways, I just got them together, and we used to then, and I had one of the paellas I made in Michigan was the same thing. It was in the winter, and when everybody came, that night it snowed, and I set up my grill outside in the snow. So I've made several of them with standing in snow, but then we moved to Puerto Rico, and I made several for when we were doing Pee Wee football and so forth. And that just evolved from there. I've probably made more since we moved to Dalton, because actually I bought this after we moved to Dalton. I moved it one day. We were in Puerto Rico, and I bought the paella dish. And the next time I bought the burner and so forth. So that if you want to know, most of the paellas I've made in the last 40 years.
Yeah. It's like every Thanksgiving season, Christmas season, New Year's season.
It's been like 2 or 3 years, 2-3 times a year.
Right.
It varies.
So this is a bonus.
Yeah.